So this video follows on from the previous one that was an introduction to writing Python programs in Codespaces. So if you haven't watched that, you might want to go back to that one. But from this point, I've already created a Codespace with a very simple Python program in it. And I'm now logged into this GitHub account. I'll just go back to the dashboard here. And then I can go into Codespaces, and then when I scroll down, I can see the Codespace that I've got. If I want to activate this, we can see this is not actually currently active. So I click on this, it jumps around a little bit, but I can see how here I can open in browser. So this opens up the and activates the Codespace, and it also puts me back into the Codespace. So if I just go back onto the Codespaces tab here and just refresh that, I can see that it's now active, and this is where I am, just to show this was a Python program that worked. Let's run the program, and in a moment we can see that the output comes up, so it's all working. But I did point out that this Codespace here is not actually it's not a GitHub repository, and although it's linked to GitHub, it's not a GitHub repository by itself. So there's a possibility after 30 days of inactivity that will automatically be deleted, and I'll lose that. So we really should know how to be able to save this content into a GitHub repository so we can keep this code more permanently. I mean, there's lots of ways to go about connecting code between Codespaces and GitHub. And so I could have initially started some code in a GitHub repository and then opened it in a Codespace. But in this instance, I started the Codespace without having a GitHub repository. So that's the state I'm in at the moment. So what I want to be able to do at this stage is to actually now save that code into a GitHub repository. I'm certainly no expert in this, but let's have a look here. If we go into the source control, it does seem to give us this option here where we can you can directly publish this folder to a GitHub repository. That sounds like what we want. Once published, you'll have access to the source control features powered by Git and GitHub. So let's try and see if we can do this and get it into a repository. So it published to GitHub private repository. This looks like the right location, and I can choose to give it a name. So I will try for test 2024 because this is my test here, and we can see here it's either going to be a public or a private or public repository. I'm going to choose public at this stage. And I think, well, it says here the files, select which files that should be included in the repository. Well, I just want this one file, and there is only the one file there, so I'll go OK. So what does it tell us here? It says successfully published to this particular repository in GitHub, so that's looking pretty good. And then it gives us some other options. Would you like Visual Studio Code to periodically run git fetch? I'll just go ask me later because I'm not sure whether I really want that. But at this particular point, it sounds like this has already been published. Let's go in and check. I'll go back into the Codespaces. Now, again, there's a few ways to get here. I'll just go back to my home. I don't have to do this, I don't think, but well, perhaps this seems to work in this case. I can see here that I'm now in the GitHub, and I can see here we have a repository. Let me click on that for a moment. And I can see in here, in this repository, I have this test1 code there. So this code is now safely stored in a GitHub repository. And let me just go back into my Codespaces. Let's see how we will subsequently manage that. So let's put another not line in here. Let's make sure that runs okay. And just if we weren't already in this source control here, we can click it here, and we can see we have the option to commit those changes to the repository. So the program, if you don't understand much about Git or GitHub, the way this is working in Visual Studio Code is this program is automatically saved within the code space, but it hasn't been committed to the GitHub repository. So to do that, we need to do a commit. Again, this is quite a process with Git. So we can probably just follow the prompts. That there are no stage changes. Would you like to stage all changes and commit them directly? We'll just say yes to that. To complete this step, I've actually got to type in, if I read here, I've got to type in a commit message. Given the simple nature of this, I'm just going to write something that's also simple. First commit, and click yes. Now, effectively, what that's done is committed to the GitHub or the Git repository in Codespaces, but I haven't actually synced that with GitHub itself. That may seem a bit strange, but to do that, I have to not just do the commit, but I also need to do some sort of a push. And this says here, syncing changes. This action will pull and push commits, which is what I want. I'll go OK, and we'll see here that it runs the sync, and it seems to be pretty happy. So at that particular stage, I now should have, if I go back into the GitHub repository and go back into this particular GitHub repository, I should see that it's all up to date. And I can see here I've got the third line added to it. Let me just return to the home there. So we now have our code here working nicely with GitHub. That's all.